Oh, there's Major League Baseball out there on the card tonight. I know nobody who is even playing in most of these games didn't open the card, didn't cap the card. So what I'm basically saying is we're not talking baseball tonight. This is a football Friday here. We're going to have a lot of fun. There's 4 games on the slate tonight, 2 of them very good football games. Obviously, tomorrow, Saturday, a full slate. Sunday, NFL action as well. I do have a guest here on the telecast tonight, Mr. Drew Martin, at Drew Martin Bets on Twitter. You can find him all over the channel here at sportsbookreview.com. Also with at SBR Sports Picks. You can check him out on Marketology. You can check him out on Man versus Machine. You can also check him out as the host of the Roundtable every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Drew, welcome into the show, buddy.
Donnie, thanks for having me on, man. Football Friday, like you said. And what about this Friday card? I mean, the Saturday card's good. For whatever reason, I seem to like a lot of favorites on it. But tonight's card, it's the best Friday card year to date so far, huh?
Yeah, no, you got ones right. I mean, as soon as we get this, literally as soon as I push end show, or the guys back there in the department hit end show, Miami, Florida, Duke's going to come right up there, just going to sit back and relax and have a lot of fun. By the way, Drew, my opening tonight there, I mean, that was right off the top of my head. I'm remembering your shows, time you're on, what you're doing around the channel. I mean, that's pretty impressive right there from a host, huh?
Dude, yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, the Marketology, I love. You forgot your partner in crime, BMOC Bet Buffet.
You know what? I watched it there, and that is the new interlude. Like, around the channels, you have the yes, and you have the hey, and welcome into the show, everybody. That is now a new one added to the lure of, SBR opening of shows. So congratulations on doing that there.
Thanks, Donnie. And I got to tip my cap to you and Jeff. The impersonations today. Zach sent me the I wasn't watching it live, but it was pretty awesome, man. You hit me pretty good. You got Paulie's down perfect. So you got a couple of them good.
Yeah, to Friday we wind down the week, and somebody in the chat box, gets us a little bit wound up in there. Next thing you know, we're picking on everybody at Sports Review. But honestly, it's out of love. I mean, we do a lot of shows together. We poke fun at everybody. There's a ton of videos that come out. We all critique each other and have a good time. So, I mean, that was just a time to let loose. And who knows, we might end some of these shows, hey, how about this guy or that guy do a referendum on that? You're going to start doing that as well when we do the roundtable. What is it? Ian has his 60 seconds of Ian Cameron there. We might just have to start doing some improv there live on the show. But it's a lot of fun, and I'm glad you liked my impersonation of you. But tonight, there is football to talk about here, Drew. Why don't we kick it off here? 105-106. Miami of Florida versus the Duke Blue Devils heading up to Wallace Wade Stadium. Line's been bouncing back and forth throughout the week. You can see as little as 4.5, as high as 6.5. Even I think early in the week, we had 7.5 creeping up. Obviously, Duke backers did take that one down. I think this line is going to settle anywhere between 6 to 6.5 tonight, Drew. Which way are we leaning on this one?
I'm leading with the Dukies, man. I think that they have one of the most underrated coaches in the nation. Cutcliffe, what he's been able to do throughout his career as an offensive coordinator and now at Duke, I think it's something you definitely got to pay attention to. And also, Donnie, I'll bring up the spot-wise. You know what? Miami went 3 full weeks in between games number 1 and games number 2. Now they got to turn around on a short week, go on the road, night game in Durham. I haven't really checked out the whole schedule for Duke, but this has got to be one of, if not the biggest game on their schedule. It's going to be kind of a tough atmosphere there and a short week after the long layoff. I don't like that at all. The only way I would look at this is towards Duke, Donnie.
You know what? Again, everybody knows I'm a really big Miami Hurricanes fan. I don't necessarily, it's not so much liking the spot, because maybe if you looked a couple years ago where, hey, look, we got to go out and play Duke. Roll your helmet out there. Let's, 14 or 13.5 point line. Let's get the win, go home. Big team on deck, Florida State. We haven't beaten them in, damn near seems like a decade. We need to win that football game next week. But first, we got to handle Duke. But I think Mark Richt's a good enough coach to let these Hurricanes know, like, hey, look, this isn't 2002 again. We're going to stomp over like a Rutgers or when Duke was really bad. This is a 4-0 Duke football team playing good defense, a well-coached football team with a good quarterback, some good running backs, good wide receivers. Overall, not nearly what you're used to seeing with Duke. Miami really needs to strap this one up, and I think they're going to be ready for this football game. I think Miami wins the game, but again, I can see Duke hanging around and giving Miami hell tonight. Would I like a nice 42-7 win by my Miami Hurricanes? Sure, I would. But if you're asking me to bet this football game, it's going to come down to what that line is. If you're going to give me 6.5, I'm probably going to lean on Duke. But if you're going to be 4.5 or 4, probably going to lean on Miami. I won't be wagering on this game either way. Just really looking forward to it to see how it's going to settle and come out. Hopefully Miami escapes with this one and moves on to Florida State. How about the over-under in this one, Drew? Opening up about 56, 57.5, depending on where you're getting it. Looks like you're seeing some movement towards the under. Now looks like 55 flat in some places. Any idea, Drew, on the total in this one that you want to lean on?
I don't have a strong feel for it, Donnie. I have noticed in some of these kind of marquee games, though, there has been some under money, at least getting closer towards kickoff. For whatever reason in college football, maybe it's kind of like a peak on overs where we were getting the last couple years, but I have noticed that towards kickoff. And you bring up a good point. You're a Miami fan. I'm from South Florida. I know this program really well, grew up going to games. And I will say this, if you're making the argument towards the Miami side, the talent gap between Duke and Miami has been pretty wide. So I believe Duke is 2-5 ATS, their last 7 against Miami. So going into this game, they have had trouble closing that talent gap. And we know Miami has the more talented athletes, but coaching-wise, even quarterback-wise, the way that the offensive scheme is going to work, I think, favors Duke. And you mentioned Duke's 4-0. They're also, I believe, 3-0 or 4-0 ATS year to date as well, and killed the closing number by, I believe, over 40 points year to date. So they've been mispriced, not been priced appropriately as far as how good Duke is. So, but as far as your question towards the total, I'm definitely not playing this total, but that would be one reason towards the under money, at least here late, honey.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you there. And I actually agree with the under. I can see it playing a little bit more low scoring. You're right. A little bit of a short week for Miami heading up to Duke. Duke's going to be excited for this game. And if you watch Duke over the first couple of games, they play really good defense. I mean, Northwestern, Baylor this year, and last week UNC, probably not on the talent level of Miami, but they handled all 3 of those and passed with flying colors. Should be a fun game to watch here. Next up here, obviously tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 107-108, Drew. Nebraska and Illinois in this game. Opened up at 7 at Pinnacle, 6.5 at Chris. Looks like we're getting 6 at Sportsbook, but primarily 5.5 to 6 where you're looking at. 49.5 the total opened up at Pinnacle, Drew. 52 opened up there at Chris. That line sits at 46.5 in some outlets there, so not looking for a lot of points from what I'm reading here. I don't have a good feel for this football game. Number one, the basis of looking at Nebraska, not only taking Nebraska, but now you're saying, all right, Nebraska, go on the road and lay points. Illinois, Lovie Smith. We all joked about, when they hired Lovie Smith, guys just looking for a paycheck. It was a name. They were struggling as a team, a little bit of a distraction to firing the previous head football coach. That's not going to work out too much longer. But again, I'm not laying points at any point right now with the Nebraska Cornhuskers.
Yeah, I agree with you. No way I'm laying with Nebraska. And also Illinois, like you said, we joked about him, Lovie Smith. I hate that type of hire, that profile of the retread NFL guy. I'd rather get a young kid that's hungry and recruiting. But as far as Illinois, look, last time out, it was a weekday game against USF. I thought they actually looked pretty good, Donnie. I know that they ended up losing by about, at least, I don't know, about 20-ish points 20, to USF. Yeah. But that USF team, we got to remember, they're really good. And I thought Illinois looked at least decent. So putting them at home, extended preparation time for the Cornhuskers, who have to go on the road short week after, having a competitive game against Rutgers. I don't like this spot for Nebraska. So the only way I would look is towards the Illini.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you in that situation. Over, under in this one, it's college football. I know Nebraska hasn't looked good. They barely moved the football, it seemed like, against Rutgers. Didn't have a very good showing against NIU. But it's 46.5. If you're just saying, hey, Don, you got a free bet on this game, what are you going to take? It's college football. I'm taking the over 46.5. Any idea, Drew, what you might be looking at for a total in this perspective?
I agree with you. Same thing. I mean, even though Nebraska's looked like hell, their quarterback play hasn't been good. Illinois the same way. When you get under 50 in college football, that's a tough one. You got to have some cojones to go under 50. So I'm with you. The only way I would bet this is up and over.
No doubt about it there. Thanks for everybody tuning in on the live chat box. We'll have some fun If you have any games that you want to reach out to, we've been trying to kick them through later in the day. I know with the right side of campus, we went through a bunch. Yesterday on the closing line with Teddy, we went through a bunch of NCAA football game. Also, if you have any NFL questions here, shoot them out as well. Me and Drew can certainly go over them. Also tonight, CG Technologies' Matthew Holt's going to join us here at about 6:30 p.m. Eastern time and go over across the counter to see where some of that money's coming in. I do have some questions on a few games because there have been some, quote-unquote sharp movement and square movement throughout the week. We like to certainly get that tracked in. But next up, Drew, the Battle of Utah tonight minus Utah itself. BYU versus Utah State. About 9,000 tickets have been tracked on this one. 56% here, Drew, are leaning towards the home team. Opened up at about a pick 'em. This line's been funny all day. I saw it as high as Utah State 2.5, Drew. Now it looks like BYU getting some money back. Chris reposting a number of BYU -1. If you're just a public bettor, you're not sure about this football game, just on its head, you say, wait a second, why is BYU in a pick 'em with Utah State? Never even heard of Utah State. Utah State's had a weird track getting into this ball game tonight. Over the past few years, much more talent on Utah State's side and certainly a much better football team. This year, you don't really know what to get, Drew, because we talked about it before the show started. Utah State getting blown out, albeit by like a Wisconsin, I believe it was. I'm not looking at the schedule. Wins by blowout. The next week, I believe it might have been in maybe an Idaho State or something like that. I'm not even looking at the schedule. Blown out the next weekend, then blows somebody out. Just really weird heading into this one. So if you're going on blowout, non-blowout, BYU should blow them out tonight, Drew? Is that what we're looking at?
I mean, this you want to talk about volatility, Donnie. I feel like you're just going to the craps table and gambling, truly just going after it in this one. And yeah, you talk about Utah State. I mean, blown out Wisconsin, blew out Idaho State, whoever they are, got blown out by Wake Forest, and then blew out San Jose State just last week. So going against BYU, who has looked like absolute crap year to date, this one's just tough. I mean, BYU, it looks like did they open up as high as 6 and it's been bet all the way down to pick 'em? That's kind of a crazy move throughout the week. And then now it's fluctuating all over the place. I really have no idea. I'm staying away from this one. We have a hell of a Friday college football card, but this is one that I have no idea on, Donnie.
Yeah, I know. It used to be ESPN would give us maybe an ESPN2 game where the only game of the night would have actually been BYU, Utah State. Drew, we'd be like, ooh, thank goodness we got Friday Night Football in here. I can't wait to bet this football game. But this one is definitely down on the totem pole. I think the early game tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern time, then the nightcap are going to be really some fun watching on TV. 111, 112, Drew, USC is going to travel up to Washington State on the Palouse and see if they can take down Washington State and the Pirate up there. 22,000 tickets have been tracked. 61%, however, still thinking that USC is going to get the job done tonight. Line opened up, depending on where you got it, anywhere between 4 to 4.5, but that line seems to be settling, moving up and down. USC, I woke up this morning, overnight must have got some moves or early in the morning hit there up to -6. Chris now showing a 4.5, Sportsbook -5, Bet Online -5, the Greek at 4.5. So some money now coming back to Washington State. This line's been fluctuating 4.5 to 6 all day today, Drew. How about some thoughts on this football game where it might end up?
I think USC is the right side in this, Donnie. I haven't bet them yet. I was hoping to find a 3 flat, never found it, so didn't get there. But when you look at Washington State and who they beat, and also I want to bring up, before the season started, there's these Game of the Year lines that come out at sportsbooks, mainly in Las Vegas, and this was lined at 10. So now it's all the way down to 4.5. Why? We knew it was going to be in Pullman. We knew everything up to this short week for USC on the road, Pac-12 play. But it moves 6 points. Why? Because Washington State, was in a close game with Boise State, who hasn't looked that good, or beat Oregon State and Nevada, who are both terrible. I mean, USC is also undefeated, year to date. I know that they struggled against Western Michigan, but Western Michigan's not bad this year. They're pretty good. Mm-hmm. The Texas defensive front gave them trouble. That's a better defensive front than Washington State's going to put up. And then against Cal, yeah, I guess you could say 30 to 20 is a little bit closer than you would have liked for the USC fans, but I still don't think that's worth a touchdown move towards Washington State. So I know it's a tough spot on the road, Pac-12 play. It's going to be live, but I just think USC is the more talented team and defensively can get and neutralize Luke Falk. So I think USC is the side in this one, Donnie. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, what's interesting about this one, Drew? This really has the same feel and the same line move, so to speak, as last night's game between Texas and Iowa State, where you had that, you want to be sharp and you want to take the home team in this one, even though you think the other team is more talented, but they're in a good spot. This one seems to me it gives a feel of that same way if you're looking just line-wise. But overall from the game, if you're taking a look at Washington State and why you think they can win this football game, Sam Darnold hasn't been amazing this year, but you also have a banged-up wide receiver in Burnett. You also have Ron Jones, who's banged up as well, who missed the last football game. If you're telling me coming into this football game that USC is completely healthy with all of their weapons, that's a little bit of a different story. But I'm going to be a little bit nervous if I'm backing USC in this spot, not knowing exactly what I'm going to get out of those two players. Are they going to suit up for the football game? Looks like they are. But this game is not on grass where it's, nice weather down at USC. You're going to go up on that hard turf in Pullman. And you know as well as I do, Drew, playing football, playing sports your whole career, when you're going to give it a go, you feel good at practice. You don't really open it up. You say, you know what, I'm going to be okay. But you're going to have 300-pound bodies lead. Ron Jones hits that hole up the middle, A gap, B gap, tries to make that one jump cut in the hole. His ankle's bad. He leaves the game after 2 or 3 carries. This is going to be a completely different ball game. I won't be betting this game, but obviously I'll be watching it. But just from a Washington State perspective, I think they can hang around in this football game. I don't know if they can win it outright. Say, hey, man, this is stone cold winner for Washington State. I would lean more towards Washington State just because, Drew, the uncertainty that USC has at a couple key positions here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel strongly about the USC side, so I haven't bet it, but I don't necessarily disagree with you, Donnie. One thing I do want to point out is your analogy towards last night's game. I went into this week thinking the same thing with Texas, Iowa State, and USC, Washington State. Wanted to get there with Texas, didn't, and now wanting to get here with USC. It's almost like I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't. So I just feel like I got to stay away from it again, especially laying more than a field goal. If it drops to 3, I might take a bite.
Yeah, I mean, even if you want to counterbalance that, Drew, with the earlier game tonight, Miami and Duke, that same feel again. Line reaches like 6.5, 7, gets pulled back down 4.5 to 5. A lot of these have that same feel, and all 3 of the teams coming in. I mean, you can argue Texas obviously is probably more talented than Iowa State, Miami more talented than Duke, USC more talented than Washington State, all in that same spot. Big games at home. Wonder if we can catch them. Our crowd's going to be really excited. But as well as I do, Drew, after the first 2 or 3 plays, talent takes over in that football game, and we'll see what's what. I just want to see how healthy USC is coming in. Again, if you're on the chat box there, you say, Donnie, why don't you have a feel for that USC-Washington State game? It's a big game and a lean. This is one of those games that, the quality of sitting in your living room, you're on your laptop, maybe you open up a live bet. How about if the game is early on, you see Ron Jones limp off the field or DeAndre Burnett limp off the field or something like that happens. Now you have a better feel for that football game of what's actually going to take place. Might be some open to some live wagering and maybe some halftime wagering for us. There's a lot of options here that we can use tonight, Drew, as opposed to just firing away at the start of the game if you're not comfortable with it.
Yeah, I agree. This could be a great spot for live betting. And also what you brought up as far as wanting to be on the sharp side, like we kind of heard, it kind of just feels like, Iowa State last night was the sharp side, and it kind of gets in your head. You got to remember to keep that stuff out, man. I don't know how you do it, but I feel like I made a mistake last night. So sometimes you just got to trust your instinct. And if you think USC is the better team, go ahead and lay it. But you also got to remember to get good numbers. So it's kind of a mix there. Not sure how you deal with that day in, day out, Donnie.
Yeah, no, it's completely different for me when you look at NCAA football to NFL football. Obviously, there's much more games. The spreads vary quite a bit. Sometimes each book might have maybe a point or point and a half off, which is usually not the case in the NFL. And again, it's hard just to win football games in the NFL as opposed to college football. In the NFL, you want to be, quote unquote, a little bit sharper because really, any given Sunday, albeit it was a bad movie by Al Pacino, but going back over the years, that is a true statement in the National Football League. Anybody can beat anybody for the most part in the NFL. Taking the points always works, trying to use the public against you. But in college football, I think if you're trying to be a sharp college football bettor, for whatever terminology you take that on, it doesn't work out as well as the NFL does because I think just there's so much talent disparity that's going to go overboard. Better coaches, better talent on one side of the football as opposed to the other. Where the NFL, they're professionals getting paychecks each and every week. So it's something to keep an eye on in that situation. But if you're just coming in tonight, Drew, and saying, oh, man, Duke real sharp side, let me take Duke. And, yeah, Washington State sharp, that's not the greatest way to do it as opposed to a complete and lengthy breakdown there for us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's almost like the disparity between the final scores and the closing line is higher in college football, which it is. And it's just a higher volatility of one team towards the other. So as far as, are you getting 10.5 or 11? it matters. It just matters less in the NFL. And about any given Sunday, man, that was a good movie. And I need to throw in a little tidbit here. My mom was actually in that. She's a nurse at Broward General, and when they go into the hospital, the starting quarterback went down. My mom was in the background, so sleeper little tidbit there.
You got that info. You got that backdoor information that we all look for there. One of my buddies is actually a scan technician at South Carolina. So whenever they get players in, like a hamstring injury or something like that, I always think that's kind of fun. Like, hey, guess who I'm scanning today? Hey, is it going to help me out this weekend in the football game? Everybody's always looking for these added advantages and going. It's kind of funny how we all stumble on and get some of this additional information. Drew, Saturday, wide open card for us here. In about 10, 15 minutes, Matt Holt's going to join us here. We'll go across the wire. We'll save this first segment here for college football. Then after Matt, we'll go over some NFL action. Any games that you want to look at here on Saturday that you might have a read on, or just some interesting games that you might be watching this weekend that we can let the chat box guys know about?
Yeah. Let's see. I know some guys.
Pick them out. We'll fly by. Yeah, we'll fly by anything. Any game that you see on there you just want to talk about, we'll go over it. Or
Lou Scott was asking about North Texas Southern Miss. I wish I had something for you, Lou. I don't have a feel on either of those two teams, but let's do 177, 178. Vandy, Florida. I just think Vandy plus nine's the side in this one, Donnie. What do you think?
Looking earlier in the week, I think everybody was under the same impression, which always makes it a little bit dangerous. The minute they posted a 10 number in that, your first instinct was like, that's too many points, man. I'm just going to take Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt can actually win the football game, is what you're thinking on Monday and Tuesday. As it comes down the week and you look, you try to analyze what Vanderbilt actually is. Slow it down, play good defense. Shermer's going to move the football. Maybe Webb makes a few plays for you. Florida's a really good defense, as you watched over the games. Offensively challenged, just to say the least. But if you were still sticking around and getting that double digits, I can't hate on you. If you just blind took that game and said, I'm taking double digits with Vanderbilt. I don't care how this game ends up, but I'm not laying 10. I'm going to take the 10. I tend to agree with you in that. But some of the line movement has now dipped lower. It looks like 9, 8.5, even at sportsbook.com. 83% of the tickets right now, Drew, spread-wise, coming in on the Vanderbilt Commodores. Didn't show up last week, but again, it's Alabama. Alabama was out to try to, exact some revenge, and they heard all the chatter all week like, oh man, wait till Alabama gets in and gets a piece of us on Saturday. And you see it even if you cross over with Alabama this weekend. Nick Saban's up at the podium. What's he saying? Something about Ole Miss. They think they have our number. Okay, we'll see about that, which is always a detriment when you get a motivated Alabama team. But this completely different. Vanderbilt's going to go on the road. 59-0 is what the country saw last week. I think this is going to be a low slug out. Sometimes I even try to overanalyze you and say, wait a second, over-under in this football game is only 40 points. They're probably going to get there. Florida can put up X amount. Vanderbilt can put up X amount. But I see this game a punt fest, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Who's going to make that mistake first? Del Rio's going to get the start at quarterback. Is that you think is going to make any factor there? I know they played musical chairs so far, quarterback down at Florida. How about with the start of Luke Del Rio in this one, who has seen some action over the years at Florida? What do you think about that?
Yeah, Donnie, that's actually the reason I haven't bet it yet. I haven't really broke down their quarterback play to have too much of an intelligent answer on it. I just feel that Vanderbilt's defense, outside of that Alabama game, where sometimes, when you start getting past like the 30-0 mark, I start to write some of that stuff off, Donnie, just because I feel like it's all the same. So coming back this week, that's why I think Vanderbilt is the right side. However, you bring up a good point. The market seems to be onto it, and that 83% that you brought up, that kind of scares me as well. So maybe it's not, man. Maybe you just talked me off of it now that you say that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting the double digits, it's nice because you're talking about two teams, I don't want to say offensively challenged for Vanderbilt. It's just, they're just not as athletic. They have to move the ball a certain way to try to put up points. We all know Florida's full of five-star athletes. Say what you want about their program. A lot of guys suspended. There's still a lot of talent on the other side of the ball. I don't see very many points in this one, which means that they'll get into a shootout. But the one thing I don't get from Florida is why aren't you you're going nowhere this season overall, so to speak. Why aren't you just letting the young kid Felipe Franks out there? Just let him go through his growing pains. Let him have the season. If he stinks, then all right, we're going to have to look elsewhere. If he shows some intelligence, improves as the years go on, you have another 2-3 years with the kid. Maybe you can build something off him. The musical chairs right away here just doesn't make any sense, and you did it from game one. So are we going to see, 3 quarterbacks damn near every football game as soon as Florida struggles in the first quarter? That's what I always look at as a team that's sort of fractured on offense. because no matter what happens, and Drew, again, going back to playing football, when you hear 3 different cadences in the huddle, 3 different cadences at the line of scrimmage, it throws everything on. You're not used to where the football is going to come from as a wide receiver, how you're going to even receive the handoff from the quarterback. So it's always a mess there. At least you know with Vanderbilt, you know who the quarterback is, you know who the running back is, you know what to expect. It's hard to bet Florida when they're just, circling the chairs on the Titanic, so to speak there, Drew.
Yeah, great point there, Donnie. I'll tell you, from playing quarterback and coming in, even getting the center quarterback exchange can be tough. You're thinking about it instead of reading the defense. So you bring up a great point there. And to add on to that, when the quarterbacks don't bring different positives to the team, like if one's more of a pocket passer and then the other one, is more of a dual threat guy, I can see it working a little bit more. But when the two guys kind of have the same, athletic ability, I really don't get it. I think unless one guy just absolutely totally lost confidence, then you make the switch. But if you're just making the switch to make the switch, I don't like that either. And as far as the Florida coaching goes, I'm not a big fan of them. I mean, this administration, I know I'm in the minority here, but I like the Muschamp administration. At least he had a great defense. Florida, has a pretty good defense now, but I don't think it was what it used to be under Muschamp.
Yeah, no, the funny thing about Florida also is you go to McElwain, and he's supposed to be the offensive guru. I mean, they look absolutely awful on offense. And you can't say, well, hey, we just don't get the talent here. No, you pretty much have the pick of the litter at Florida to try to make it happen. I know you lost Callaway and a couple other guys, but there's no reason Florida should be this bad of shape on offense. So we'll see if they can turn it around. Drew, we're going to go a little bit of small school action here with a familiar face. And I want to get your point of view on this football game. 175-176. Your favorite team in the world, the UTEP Miners versus Army. A heavy number out there, Drew. Opened up at 24. Looks like it's about 22.5 across the board. Over under sitting light at 47.5. Is there any hope for Sean Kugler there to try to get a win or just get close to Army in this football game?
Hey, Donnie, before we start, remind me 117-118 to come back at you. But as far as UTEP comes, no, this is Fade City, man. I'm already on Army, bet them on the opener, and actually got a bad number. I can't believe people are betting UTEP, so it's down a little bit. But I just love – Big Man kind of got me onto this. Looking at the military academies, they don't kill themselves. Going against UTEP, who's now banged up. I mean, UTEP sucked anyway. Now the backups are in. Their quarterback – watching him throw the football, I mean, it really makes me want to put on
Metz back? Isn't a big move here with Metz coming back into the equation?
Dude, he sucks too. Watch these guys drop back. They have no athletic ability, and they throw the ball like they're so late on their out routes. It's awful, man. And that's a big deal to why UTEP's so bad. And one reason I really like to lay the points with Army is they're going to be running the same offense late in the third quarter, up 3 touchdowns that they are, the first play of the game. They still run that option, same thing as Navy. So I don't mind laying the points against a hapless UTEP defense, Donnie.
Yeah, no, I thought you would like that there. I mean, that's a long trip. I mean, you're talking about UTEP right on the border of Texas and Mexico. Now you're going to fly, more than across the country up to play at West Point. So we'll see how they travel. Well, do they even care at this point? It's going to be kind of funny to see that. In just a few moments here, we'll be joined by Matt Holt. Let's get to that one more game that we wanted to take a look at. 117 and 118, South Florida Bulls, East Carolina Pirates. You're going to have South Florida traveling to East Carolina to play. Line opened up about 24.5, but we did see some action coming on this game. I know it was 23.5 earlier this morning, and a couple of these lines got hit. You even see a 20.5 appear for the favorite, South Florida. Over-under opened up, really liberal at a couple places, 174, 169, but it looks like it's settled in right around that 74 number here. What are we looking at, Drew, in 117, 118 here between the Bulls and the Pirates?
Well, I mean, looking at East Carolina, they've been terrible, Donnie. And then last game, they had the standalone Sunday game for the college football card. And I didn't see it, but they scored, over 40 points? I don't know what's going on there. I actually ran into a guy here at the office who brought your name up, said he was watching one of the shows, and you said that this would be the highest scoring game of the year, something like that. So I wanted to get...
year. I have it as the highest scoring game on Saturday, even though I know that Texas Tech line is up around 80 or whatever that is, 80 low 80s.
So what are you seeing in the ECU offense that you found change in or something to bet on?
Yeah, no, I had a couple I don't have my notes on the game there, but I was taking a few down a little bit. Oh, here we go. Got a little bit of notes here for ECU. The number one team in the country, Drew, taking snaps right now, USF. I mean, they're averaging in the I think it's the mid to high 90s of snaps per game. And we all know every time, in the movie Boiler Room, it's a contact sport. The more contacts you make, the more money you're going to make. It's the same thing in football. The more plays you get, the more options you get to, number one, go over the defense, but also score. Now, if you take a look from a USF perspective, it's pretty clear ECU is a really bad defensive football team. One of the worst you're going to see. I mean, if you're going to let, Brandon Sheriffs, knock around, 38 points against you, that tells you all you need to know. But also on the opposite side, ECU is going to move fast. So you have two teams that, regardless of the side, they're going to be going 100 miles an hour, snapping the ball at 24, 25 seconds on the play clock. Now, also, if you take a look at South Florida, they've scored a lot of points already in the season. But you're matching them up in the last game versus Temple. Temple's snaps per game in NCAA football, 78th. If you want to take a look at the Illini that they played, they put up in the 40s as well. They're 118th in snap count for the Illini. Now, also, if you're looking at Stony Brook, I mean, hey, we could take that out of the equation. I don't even know what they rank in there. But also, San Jose State, 81st in snaps. That means the other side of the table is trying to slow the clock down a little bit. If we look at ECU coming into this football game, Drew, 42nd in the country in taking snaps. You're going to have 1 versus 42, but also a lot of people saying, well, Donnie, ECU is a terrible football team. Look at what they did against Virginia Tech. That's also without Thomas Sirk, who's came back now. In the last game versus UConn, again, not a great defensive football team, but they're going to run up tempo. 3 wide receivers, all healthy for this football game. Sirk went 30 of 39 for over 300 yards last week. He threw 40 times. He's going to do the same this week. So I see South Florida, having a bye week next week. There's going to be no rest for them. Doesn't matter if it's the fourth quarter and they have 55 points on the board. Quentin Flowers is going to be out there knowing that he's going to have an extra week of rest time, and they're just going to be able to play. I actually see USF in this football game getting 55 to 60 points, but ECU is going to be able to counter them and at least get into the high 20s. USF's a good football team, but they're going to have a lot of swings at the plate. Sirk's playing good football after being banged up. 3 healthy wideouts, very talented. That's going to lead to a lot of points here for us, Drew.
Boom. That's a tough follow, Donnie. I like it, man. 73.5 right now at Bookmaker. That looks like low man on the totem pole. So you can get it if you got a Bookmaker account right now. And just to follow up, Sirk looked good last Sunday against UConn. Didn't look like he was favoring.
30 for 39, running about, I think he ran 14 or 15 times in that football game. So that read option is going to be there. But more importantly, again, Drew, the ECU defense is awful. If 38 points you can get up for a UConn who's awful themselves, I can't imagine what Quentin Flowers is going to be able to do. Don't be surprised if USF has like 35 points at the half in this one. It's only a matter of how much they want to score. And if this game ends up 24 to 21, so be it. But each one of these teams is going to get close to the high 90s in plays, and that just leads to points, man.
I agree, man. I like this one a lot. I like everything you said. So, yeah, looks like pretty much 74.5 across the board, yep. But Bookmaker's showing 73.5.
You got it. College football there for us. Now, coming into the day last week, I mean, there was a lot of champagne bottles popping in Las Vegas. There was a lot of wine flowing. A certain individual was buying bagels for everybody in the office. Let's see how it's going to stack up this week. CG Technologies, Matt Holt. Follow him on Twitter at Matthew Holt VP. Matt, what's going on out there, buddy?
Certainly not as favorable a start for us this week as the Green Bay Packers absolutely trounced the Chicago Bears last night. Not the start we needed. Texas getting the win and the cover at Iowa State. So the bettors getting a little bit of revenge to start the week this week. It's going to be an interesting weekend because we don't necessarily have as many big, sexy games as we've had the last few weeks. So the money's a little bit more spread out this week. It's going to be really interesting.
No, it was interesting. Watching the game last night, I mean, say what you want. You had the lightning delay out there. I thought it was from your side of the table last night, with obviously most of the people that wager on games, the casual public, always like to lean on an over, especially with Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers. What was your split last night, or what were you looking at for just from the over-under take last night in the NFL game?
We certainly needed the under, but we didn't need it monumentally just in terms of betting on the over-under. But every teaser is always to the over. All the parlays are to the over. So when you have all these teasers and parlays that end up going live from Thursday, they all connect to Saturday and Sunday games. And those accumulators can get you in trouble as a bookmaker.
Awesome. Hey, Matt, by the way, coming into tonight, this is really rare, and I guess from your side of the table, you love it as well. I mean, we had, two games last night, one NFL, which always is going to draw action as a standalone game. You also had a decent college football game, but now you flip it over to Friday Night Football. It's not like they're throwing us, some MAC games out here or some Sun Belt action. You have two bell cow games out there. From your side, is it, advantageous? Are you seeing a lot of money as these four games are showing up tonight? And some big games. You got USC. A lot of people like to bet them. Miami Hurricanes, also a national favorite. What are we seeing from tonight?
We knew coming into this week, and actually on Monday, I made a prediction with the guys in the office that the Friday night USC-Washington State game would not only be the highest handle college football game of the week, but would do at least 20% more than the second place team in terms of handle this week. And thus far, it has lived up to the expectation. It took a little while for the USC money to start coming in. We actually took early sharp money on Washington State, which was kind of a surprise considering the look-ahead number was around 8 or 9, and you were only catching 3.5 to open. But as soon as they announced that Ronald Jones and DeAndre Burnett were both going to play in this game, the star receiver and star running back for USC, the USC money started to come in, the math guys started to come in, and it has been a heavy wave of USC money, both from the public and the sharps, driving that number up from 3.5 all the way up to 5.5.
Yeah, we saw it because we were following it early on the right side of campus when me and Jeff were doing the show. It was kind of interesting to see because that line was bouncing all week, and as soon as we got up this morning, it was peaking as high as 6. Looks like it's came down a little bit. Same thing for that Miami-Duke game tonight, hovering early in the week around 7, 7.5 in some spots, but it looks like some money, I'm assuming, came in on Duke to drive that price down. It will be interesting to see the way that one ends up. Heading into Saturday for NCAA football, Matt, give us some of the games that maybe we're looking a little bit uneven from your perspective, maybe a lot of money taken on a certain side or some sharp action. Talk about some of the primo games tomorrow night that we can look at.
Well, I can tell you the first one for us that's our biggest liability on the Saturday card right now, and it's a little bit of a surprise considering the history in this rivalry and in this series, is the Georgia Bulldogs. We are huge liability right now, mid-six-figure liability on the Georgia Bulldogs. And I've heard a few people with connections to the Tennessee team saying that there's some real divisiveness in the locker room. We all know Butch Jones is on the hot seat. We have players fighting players in the locker room last week. So it's not just the performance on the field by the Tennessee team last week in the 17-13 win against UMass, but also the fact that there's so many issues with the coaching staff with Butch Jones, divisiveness in the locker room, and on the other side, you have a red-hot Georgia Bulldogs team coming off a 33-3 blowout of Mississippi State, and all of a sudden, this thing's getting crazy out of hand for us. A line that I thought may go down to 6.5 when we opened it at 7, all the way up to 8.5 right now. A little bit out of control. And when you think of the series history, Tennessee won by 3 last year. Tennessee won by 7 the year in a shootout. And the last 3 prior to that, Georgia won by 7 or less in shootouts. The series history here is shootouts and a really close game. Yet everyone loves the favorite here. We're going to need Tennessee big Saturday.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I know we, from all week long, talking to a lot of people, everybody's zeroing, not only just because Georgia's been a very good football team, but you're right, heading into that calamity with Tennessee. Tried to talk a couple different angles to try to get us, worked into it of how you could build a case for Tennessee, Butch Jones circling the wagon, but that all goes out the window. It's a tough environment to play. They'll have 100,000 strong there in Neyland Stadium, and it should be a rocking atmosphere, SEC tilt, but I just think Georgia overall is the better football team in that game. There's a big game on Saturday night, Matt, I want to pick your brain about. 193-194, Clemson and Virginia Tech. Looks like from my numbers there, obviously a lot of people are going to take or back Clemson just because of the favorite. Been there, done that. But Virginia Tech is a tough environment to play in. Seeing anywhere from 7 to 7.5 across the board. From your end of the table, what are you seeing in this one, Matt?
This is our big pros versus Joes game Saturday. It's going to have the most tickets written. While Georgia is probably going to have the most dollars wagered on Georgia, Tennessee, Clemson, Virginia Tech, and rightfully so, is probably going to have the most tickets written Saturday. And look, this is a real pros versus Joes scenario. The pros are coming in. They love Justin Fuentes. They love what the atmosphere is going to be in Blacksburg. They only lost by 7 on a neutral field last year in the ACC championship. They're gobbling up those 7.5s, the sharp players. But the public loves Clemson, and why not? Clemson continues to cash tickets for the general public time after time after time, whether it be Ohio State last year, Alabama, Louisville this year, Auburn this year. Clemson continues to get the job done in big games under Dabo Swinney. So all the teasers are going to be to Clemson. All the public money is going to be on Clemson. A lot of sharp money on Justin Fuentes and the Virginia Tech team here. This is a great game for the book with a great two-way action, but a big-time pros versus Joe scenario.
Yeah, the fun is going to return for us on Saturday night. I know it's really late on the East Coast, not as late on the West Coast out there in Las Vegas, and that would be Colorado State and Hawaii. The only reason I bring this football game up, because obviously I like to hear it from the other side of the table. The spike in tickets that you probably get with everybody trying to chase down to that very last game. Give us a little bit of thoughts on Colorado State and Hawaii, and is it interesting to watch, or, that last, 11:59, get your tickets in Eastern time. Let's watch it all morning long. Does that have any impact from your side, or is it just fun to watch, or any late movement in those, just from a fun perspective on that, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely, Donnie. I mean, those are some of the most bet games every week because, to your point, people are either chasing or they're trying to, they plug the late game in a parlay or something. And this year we've had some really good games. We had San Diego State, Stanford, and we've had some nice late games. This one's not bad. Colorado State came out of the gate, all guns firing, blew Oregon State out of the doors, and then really laid an egg against division rival Colorado. Hawaii here has been a team that, I personally backed week one against UMass, got lucky to get there. They've kind of been up and down, but this game will take a ton of action. I'm not sure where the line will go. I think, the bettors are probably going to favor Colorado State. There's a little history here, a little regional bias toward betting Colorado State. We take a lot of Denver Broncos action, a lot of Air Force action. We always seem to have that regional attention toward Colorado State here, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case again here, not laying a big number.
Gotcha. Let's move it over to the professionals here on Sunday. And again, as the year goes on, to me in the NFL, Matt, from your end, I think the lines get sharper and sharper, and we're certainly seeing a lot of those today, this weekend, a lot of decisive ones. The public has already made their mark on which way they're looking at a lot of these football games. One I want to take a look at in particular, which is a game I'm interested in, 269-270, New York Giants and the Tampa Bay Bucks. From my end of the table, looks like a lot of people are piling up on the New York Giants. That line opened about 4.5, now sitting at roughly 3 with double juice across the board. What are we seeing from that football game early, and maybe some of the factors now that you see him on national TV last week? Hey, Odell Beckham's healthy. It's a Giants football team, so you're all automatically going to see that heavier surge there. What are we looking at from this game here, Matt?
So interestingly enough, there were 3 games early in the week where we just got buried, and I mean buried by sharp action, and that was the Denver Broncos driving that line from 1 to 3, the LA Rams driving that line down from 8.5 all the way down to 6, and that was all money as well. And the third one was the New York Giants, and everyone who bet it, all I ever heard was that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have the worst injury report of the entire NFL this week. Basically their entire starting 11 was questionable to play this week on defense. But as the week's gone on, it looks like a couple of these guys might actually be able to play. So it's not actually going to be 9 starters out for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. And we've started to finally see some two-way action in that game. And that was one we worried about all week. We knew we'd probably get some buyback on Oakland because Las Vegas has adopted them as their hometown team. And look, you knew you'd get some buyback on the Dallas Cowboys because it's the Dallas Cowboys. But the Giants-Buccaneers was the one we were scared. Would we get that Tampa Bay buyback? People laying the favorite, they finally started to. But there was big early sharp action on the New York Giants.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of these games, which is usually the case, Matt, especially in the NFL, buyback sending it lower. You have the Seattle-Indianapolis game opened up somewhere around 13.5, some 12.5 are coming across the board. The only game that hasn't really moved off of a higher number and seems to go a little bit higher at this point is 253, 254, Carolina in New England. Cam Newton, you see him in the news all week. Is he breaking down? Is he healthy? We know that's not an overall healthy football team coming into this game, but watching from a New England perspective, not the old New England teams that we're used to, just, putting teams away at home, letting Houston hang around, almost lost last week. We also saw them obviously lose outright opening night versus Kansas City. Are you seeing any action in this game with New England and Carolina, Matt?
Much less action than you would anticipate for a team that was representing the NFC in the Super Bowl 2 years ago with the defending reigning Super Bowl champions, and as popular as the Patriots are, this one had all the recipes preseason to be a seven-figure handle game for the book, and it just hasn't turned out to be. I think there's a lot of question marks with bettors, public and sharp, on the New England Patriots defense, ranked 32nd in the league now in yards per play. And on the other side of the ball, there's just as many question marks with the Carolina offense. Cam not having a preseason. Is he really healthy? They lose his favorite target, Greg Olsen. Kelvin Benjamin coming back, but is he actually going to be effective on the field this week? A lot of times when you have so many question marks, it keeps bettors away. And what we've seen is a game that looked like it was going to have the highest handle of the day, probably predictably a couple weeks ago, is now toward the bottom end of the handle this week.
Yep. And what I want to take a look at one more game before we get you out of here, Matt. I certainly want to thank you for your time. Everybody out here, Closing Line September 29th, presented by SportsReview.com. Currently speaking with CG Technologies' Matt Holt. Follow him on Twitter at Matthew Holt VP. Next game up here, Matt, 271-272. My Philadelphia Eagles traveling out to the West Coast to play the Chargers in Phillip Rivers. National televised game last week. Eagles overcome some adversity in the fourth quarter, beat the New York Giants, feeling good, 2-1, albeit a banged-up Eagles team going out to the West Coast. Everybody's seen the troubles that the Chargers have. They just can't, play with the Denver Broncos, lose at the end. Play with the Miami Dolphins, lose at the end. Last week at home again, playing a very game Chiefs team, 17-10 late in that ball game. I know it ended up a little bit worse than that, a 14-point win because Kareem Hunt sealed that late, but some good action coming in. I mean, the line opened up roughly about a pick 'em. Now I'm seeing in some areas as high as -2.5 as a favorite for the Chargers here. Anything from your perspective that you're looking at there in this game, Matt?
Yeah, this has kind of been the week of travel in the NFL. When you think about all the teams that have really bad travel situations, Miami, who hasn't been home since August 14th, the Jags coming over from London, as well as Baltimore coming back from London, both of them actually having to play this week. But there's one team that has a really advantageous travel situation this week, and that's the LA Chargers, playing their third straight game at home, fourth straight game in the Pacific time zone. Only can help the Chargers. Look, I think their offensive weapons and roster are better than their record so far. They were a missed field goal away from going to overtime game one against Denver. They're right there at the Miami Dolphins. And to your point, they were 7 down late against maybe the number one team in the AFC right now, Kansas City Chiefs, last week. It's very unlikely this team starts 0-4 all on the on the West Coast here. And I think the Sharps have taken note of that. Look, travel's tough. Even though their home field has been discounted by every odds maker, including myself, as the 32nd ranked home field advantage in the NFL, Philly's off a big game over a division opponent, emotional win at the buzzer. Now they fly all the way across the country to face a desperate and hungry LA team with their third straight home game. A lot of reasons to back the Chargers here, and the Sharps are doing it at a pretty heavy clip.
Fantastic. As always, college football, professional football, the guy to lean on here. I love to having you on the show. CG Technologies, Matt Holt. Again, follow him on Twitter at Matt Holt VP. Very gracious on Twitter. Ask him a question. I always see him getting back to everyone, so certainly give him a follow out there. Matt, want to thank you again. Can't thank you enough. I know you have a busy weekend starting up tonight. Thanks for spending some time here at SportsbookReview.com.
Thanks, guys. A little under the weather today, so you'll have to excuse the bad hair and the computer at home. Best of luck, everybody. Take care.
You got it. Thank you. That's Matt Holt once again there from CG Technologies. Fantastic. I always like getting that perspective from where these games are moving at, especially some of the sharper angles that we do look at there, Drew. So a lot of fun here. But we have about 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes left in the show. Let's flip this over, Drew, to some NFL action. The board is wide open. Any games that you're looking at, Drew, you want to go over? Or just want to start picking up a few here off the top?
You know what? I just want to say sorry to Patrick and Tomar not getting their questions into Matt. But no. As far as NFL, I'll take your lead, man.
Yeah, there's a couple interesting ones here. We'll start with that London game. And again, the thing I love about the NFL, which is quite different from college, is the amount of bets that come in on a single game. And it's hard to push some of these numbers over the 3.5, the 7s, the 7.5, the 7, the 6.5, 251, 252, right off the board. 9:30 a.m. start. Obviously, the game is going to be played in London. Breeze and Cutler lining it up. 75% of the public. It just looks too easy for me in this game just to take the New Orleans Saints, now laying 3, -125 in a lot of spots. So a decisive favorite on one side. Have yet to see that line blink over to 3.5. I know you can pay for it, anytime you want. But it seems to be they're holding that water like on that dam right now, not going to let it burst. From a Miami perspective, trying to lean on this one, Jay Ajayi, what are you going to get from questionable, bulky knee? What's the state of Jay Cutler? Is he just saying, man, look, I'm clearing like $800,000 a week right now. I just want to make it to the end of the season. I'm going to go home to my wife and my kids and just live my life. I never even should have come back. I don't know where that mindset is right now, because if you watched Adam Gase last week, wasn't really happy with Miami's effort, and he shouldn't have been. Went up to New York and got absolutely trounced, getting a little bit back of ammo. I don't make too big of a deal about, like a Willie Snead coming back. But Drew Brees is Drew Brees. They're getting a little bit healthier on the offensive line. Good running backs. We'll see what they can have on defense, but it's either put up or shut up with Miami this week for me, Drew.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, you talk about that mindset. That's got to be one of the worst for an NFL quarterback. I mean, his wife is pretty damn good looking, but back-to-back road games, then heading to the road to London. I mean, what the hell was the NFL doing? Not doing Miami any favors. I would think that has a lot to do with this, and I agree with you. It's Saints or pass for me, Donnie.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, you always one of those angles that you cap in the NFL is like 2 or 3 straight road games. You had a hurricane where Miami had to fly out and practice on the West Coast. Then they played on the West Coast. Then they flew home. Then they flew up to New York to play. Now they're going to fly across the pond to play New Orleans, a worn-out football team. I mean, they do. Now, don't get me wrong. They're staying in 5-star hotels. They're taking charter jets where they eat filet mignon and, have 3 seats to themselves. So it's not that bad when it all turns out as if it was like the 1950s or 60s where they're flying commercial. But just in that game, Miami's just had a struggle. I agree with New Orleans being the favorite here. I'm not really a big stickler on laying, 3 or anything more than that in the NFL. I usually lean on taking the points, but just hard-pressed to see what type of effort you're going to get out of Miami at this point. But certainly should be an interesting one. We'll pick one more game out before we get out of here, Drew. You want to pick any of these out? You just want me to go right down here for us?
What about Buffalo, Atlanta, man? You getting on the Falcons this weekend?
I probably won't be touching. I like to stay away from games that are like 7 or higher, but I can see the vantage point here. I even saw Atlanta dip down to as low as 7.5, but looks like they caught some money today. Sportsbook.com now showing a healthy 8.5 in this one. It's hard for me to go against Atlanta at this point, especially at home. I know Beasley's out, a little bit banged up on defense. 2 very capable running backs. Now, the one thing that might give you a little bit of pause if you do, best wide receiver, maybe the best player in football, Julio Jones, a little bit banged up, had that stiff back coming in. We'll see how that lines up. But the one thing I like, Drew, from a Bills perspective is Sean McDermott, obviously being the defensive coordinator back for Carolina. He knows this team inside and out, personnel from just dealing with them 2 times a year. Now he goes up to Buffalo, coming down back to Atlanta to bring the Bills in. The one question I have, which, again, they played very well last week, held the Denver Broncos, I believe, the 16 points, did enough on offense to move the ball. The only problem with this game, Drew, is you can't just do enough on offense and try to beat the Bills. Atlanta's going to put up points on you regardless. Can you hang around? Can Shady have that big game, getting 20 to 25 touches? It's a tough one. If you're asking me, saying, you know what, Don, you got to bet this football game, I'm probably still going to lean towards Atlanta, even though it is over a touchdown and it's hard to win by double digits in the NFL. But Atlanta at home, after escaping last week, I think they're going to be a pretty game team down there in the Dome.
Yeah, I've never been interested in betting against the Falcons in the Georgia Dome. Now it looks like Mercedes Dome is the same way, and they look really good against Green Bay. Putting up 34 points in the only home game that they've had so far, 2-1 ATS. So yeah, that's why I brought that one up. I mean, I was looking towards the Falcons, and it looks like Buffalo about to go back-to-back road games, which I'm never interested in. And I guess they did look pretty good against Denver, but losing to Carolina, and then Carolina, looking like crap against the Saints. So that makes me not want to get anywhere near the Bills. But you bring up a good point. I mean, laying over 7 with, your best wide receiver out, that's always a scary proposition.
Yeah, he's probably not going to be out, but I mean, just a little bit banged up. You say, hey, man, let's just get this win at home. We don't have to cover and win by 14 points. We'll sneak one in under the wire because I have a pretty interesting one here. 275, 276, Drew. That's going to be Oakland at Denver. Oakland was embarrassed on Sunday Night Football. Now, I love conspiracy theories. I love, trying to get insider information. I'm rolling down on Twitter. One of the guys I follow just puts out that random tweet saying, hey, did you see that report that came out where Oakland basically, gave up on the football game with Washington because as a team, they all wanted to kneel. And the Oakland Raiders offensive line, all African-American, took a knee before the game, but David Carr refused the knee and stood up during the national anthem. So there was some retribution in that right away because David Carr, with a very good offensive line, got sacked twice back-to-back on the second possession. The team looked completely out of sorts. not the Oakland Raiders I expected to show up. Now they're going to head into play Denver. And just that little conspiracy theory coming out of there, it's probably 99.9% false, but I saw that narrative coming out. It's like, maybe there's a fractured locker room. Maybe they're not ready to play. Maybe, last week's going to carry over to this week because, hey, David, if you don't take a knee in this one, we're going to let them sack you 4 times before the game gets going. Do you give any thoughts to any stuff like that? I know it's kind of wacky, but when I hear that stuff, it sort of makes me laugh. And I'm like, let me go back and watch that film.
Donnie, this is like interesting, like soap opera-ish,
Yeah.
I mean, you bring up a great point. I mean, if they're all kneeling and he's not, I would think that they would just brush it off, but maybe not, man. Maybe they take this really serious. So,
like David Carr seems like the nicest guy you could possibly have, and a real religious guy. Maybe like, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna, respect the flag, and guys, like, do what you have to do, but I'm just gonna stand back here and I'm gonna, just abide by the old time rules. And if you got, and I can see the slight if you are the offensive lineman, like, that's our quarterback right now that we protect, and he's not with us. Oh, we'll show him that, which again is probably, 99.99% false. But when I saw that, it really made me chuckle, like, hey, maybe there might be something to this. And who knows? I mean, the Raiders have always been that outcast organization, and that's the way they handle it. And there's word that's saying, like, a beat writer asked about it, and the PR guy pulled him aside, said, if you ask that question, you'll be banned from the locker room. You'll never be able to cover this team again. Don't you dare bring anything like that up. So just a little bit of food for thought if you're going against the Raiders, or even if you see one of those games, Drew, where Denver's up like 17 points early, like, yup, fractured locker room right there. They're going nowhere.
Yeah, especially if he gets sacked like twice on the opening drive. It's going to be like, oh, my God, that's all we're going to talk about early next week. I kind of want it to happen.
Yeah, they were even saying, like, wide receivers were dropping footballs, and the team was completely, like, annoyed, so they just wanted to let it out and take the loss and blame it on Carr. Because, and again, it's funny because they played so poorly on Sunday night from the first 2 games when they looked really good. I had to go back and be like, is there something to this? So just made me laugh. That's why I wanted to bring it up. But that'll be just about it for tonight, folks, on the closing line for September 29th, presented by SportsbookReview.com. Miami Hurricanes and Duke Blue Devils about to kick off here. Hopefully we gave you some information over the weekend that's going to be able to help you out. I do want to thank my guest, Drew Martin. Follow him on Twitter, folks, at Drew Martin Bets, all over the channel. Some good information he could certainly give you from marketology, Roundtable. You'll see him a lot. The Bet Buffet, obviously, man versus machine. He's all over the network, so certainly check him out and give him a follow. Also, SBRodds.com for all your latest there as well. Follow at SBR Sports Picks for all the tweets, keeping in track, the latest news, funny pictures. We do it all here at SportsbookReview.com. From all of us at Sportsbook Review, thanks for tuning in tonight. We hope we help you beat the closing line. Take care, fellas. Good luck this weekend.